Hey viewers, this is Van of the TTV podcast, and welcome to the M.O.C Spotlight, the show where I will take apart what you build. Today I'll be reviewing Starscream, created by our very own Varderan, and for my method of reviewing, I will base my final opinions on a point system that is based on three fundamental qualities: the overall appearance of the M.O.C, the concept and ideas behind it, and the build of the M.O.C itself. And each quality will amount up to 4 points each, and before we move any further, just remember, this is all my opinion, but I'll do my best to give fair criticism. So now that we're done talking about all that mumbo jumbo, let's just get right into it. So I'm gonna go out on a limb here, whatever that means, and just take a guess that this M.O.C is based on the iteration of Starscream from Michael Bay's Transformer movies. Because, I don't know, it doesn't really look like any other iteration of a Starscream. At least, to me, that is. I don't know, you can argue that all you want, this isn't the debate corner. Anyway, at first glance, this M.O.C looks quite impressive. But that's just at first glance. Nah, of course, I'm just kidding. It definitely captures the look that Starscream has in the movies, and that's already a good thing since accuracy is very important for this kind of M.O.C. Can't be Starscream if it doesn't look like Starscream, am I right? Hey, yeah. This M.O.C also has a very consistent color scheme. You have a nice blend of silver, black, gray, all that. The occasional red pins or whatever that don't really stick out all that much. Everything is fluid and comes off as robotic. We even have this one gold piece in his chest that represents the cockpit that Starscream has from his jet mode. With all that said, Starscream appears very good, but he also does seem to be a bit lacking in some areas where there are empty spaces. It's a bit jarring, and it's quite inaccurate, and I feel like something could have been done to fill up this space to give the M.O.C a more solidified look. And it might have helped the build too, but I'll get to that later. Taking that into account, we look at the back here, and it doesn't look that bad. It appears as though those empty spaces in the torso have been filled up. Maybe it's the camera angle, you sneaky little... But anyway, what's also noticeable is that there are red axles and blue pins. Oh, well, I don't think that's really my area of criticism. I'll leave that up to somebody else. But I will say this, there isn't as much to comment on as, say, other cases. But anyway, I want to wrap up talking about his robot appearance because, guess what? This M.O.C has the very impressive feature of actually being able to transform into a jet mode. So brownie points to you, good sir, for actually making this possible. I will say that is a very cool feature, however, the jet itself, I'm not so sure how I feel about it. See, in the movies, Starscream transforms into an F-22 Raptor. And assuming that this M.O.C is based on the Starscream from the movies, this doesn't really look like an F-22 Raptor. I guess any Transformer fan could say that, hey, maybe this is just his Cybertronian jet mode, or some other kind of jet mode that he transforms into, I don't know. Just doesn't really... yeah. Good job getting it to transform. I mean, hey, that's still a plus. Now I want to give some final thoughts on his robot mode. It looks cool, don't get me wrong. Some features like the head, which appears to be fairly screen accurate, at least in the shape. The shape is there. And then his clawed hand and his easily recognizable handgun, blaster, whatever it is that he has now. It's not the null ray, but it looks good. And overall, this M.O.C's appearance is great, though it does have its flaws, and for that it receives a 3 out of 4. Now moving on to concepts, this M.O.C achieves its goal of looking like Starscream, and the idea of getting this M.O.C to actually transform into a different mode entirely, I think that was executed fairly well. In my experience, I couldn't get a duck to transform into a freaking chiropractor or whatever. I find that it's very challenging to not only make a M.O.C look good, but to also give it that sort of functionality where it transforms into something completely different and still looks okay. And as a Transformers fan, this really tickled my tummy. So for Concepts Varderan, you receive a 4 out of 4 score. Now before we wrap it up, let's move on to the actual build of the M.O.C. We are going to look at it from the ground up, and by that I mean we're going to start with the legs. These are quite some tiny legs, but luckily they sport some sort of hydraulic system in order to keep the whole big upper body standing upright. Definitely a good idea to put those there, since it doesn't seem like these legs would be able to very well support that big upper body properly. And now we'll be moving up to said torso, and man, this looks very interestingly built. As I mentioned earlier, there are empty spots here and there that don't make this build look all too solid. Taking a closer look, it looks very loose and it doesn't seem all too stable. I can't say I trust all those ball joints holding up his hips and ribs, or wherever his ribs should be. It looks as if you held this M.O.C the wrong way, it would just like fall apart. Or maybe not fall apart, that's a little bit of exaggeration, but maybe implode. Definitely implode or collapse in on itself. However, I will take into account that the M.O.C was probably built this way to make the transformation feature possible. I can't be too sure since there aren't really any pictures showing off how the transformation process is done. Though I will say that the arms appear to be the most stable portion of the M.O.C. They look fairly solid, aside from the shoulders, which seem to be held by a single axle, and that looks like it's ready to pop off. Now I want to go back to the jet mode, because this is where stability really begins to fall flat. Like, if there is an opposite to saying that something really shines in this certain area, I would say that here. It looks as though the transformation process involves a lot of moving parts, and of course, but I mean, these parts are all moving on ball joints. And because they are all on ball joints, it doesn't look as though they like to stay in place. This is made evident by the fact that the jet itself appears asymmetrical. Like, there's a part on one side that sticks out, and there's a part on the other side that doesn't really stick out as much. It's like you could accidentally untransform this M.O.C just by like accidentally flicking a thing or two. Despite all that, the M.O.C appears to be fairly well built enough to a point where it can stand up for a good picture. So taking all this into account, I'm going to give the score for this M.O.C build a 2 out of 4. I feel like some things could have been done to not only make this M.O.C appear more solid, but just be more solid. Filling up those empty gaps with something to flesh it out a bit more probably would have helped the stability, and maybe trying out some different methods of shifting parts or whatever probably would have made the jet mode look a bit better too. It's a bit hard to say what exactly would help improve the build of this M.O.C and maybe the appearance, because again, transforming M.O.Cs are very hard to make. And if anything, the cons I listed are just some reasons why. And now, for the final score of this Starscream M.O.C. Overall, it receives a 9 out of 12. There's a fairly good amount of effort and some really well executed ideas being placed into this M.O.C. Yes, some decisions could have been made to make this M.O.C better, but it is still a fairly decent creation by our very own Varderan. And of course, my opinions do not dictate yours, so share what you think about this M.O.C in the comments below. You can find pictures of this on Varderan's brick shelf, which I will link to you in the description. If you would like a high possibility of me reviewing your M.O.C, post it in our message boards. I check the message boards pretty much every day, and I do plan on reviewing some of the creations I find on there. Thank you for watching. Be sure to rate, comment, subscribe. This is Ven, and I hope you enjoyed this M.O.C Spotlight. See you all next time, and such and such.